Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Steinbach, and I'm the producer of Her Bible. And thank you so much for joining us today. This is Her Story by Her Bible, and it's a podcast exploring the intersection of womanhood and the Bible. And I am so excited today to introduce you to Mary Marantz, who I've just met. And I'm excited about her heart for God and just what we're sharing and learning about how we want women and how passionate we are for women to understand their value to God. So, welcome, Mary.
Oh my gosh, Jenny, thank you so much for having me, for making some time for me. And we were just talking before we hopped on about, like you were saying, the heart we both have to just see women show up and step out in the places they're being called to do the work that they were created to do. And I can already tell just from the few minutes we've gotten to spend together, this is going to be an incredible conversation. So buckle up, everybody. It's going to get good.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So, what I'd like to just explore first is just a little of your journey and how you
Yeah.
came to Christ.
Yeah, so in my first book, Dirt, which kind of tells the story of growing up in a single wide trailer before eventually ending up at Yale for law school, I talk Jenny about being very young, like 3 or 4 years old, and feeling like God was this best friend who would draw down close enough to my window at night to leave fog marks on the glass. And it didn't feel like there was any separation. He wasn't this angry, judgmental God where everything I was doing I was getting wrong. And there's this part in that book that I really love where I talk about, and then he wasn't just showing up at night, at, bedtime prayers. He was outside in the yard during the day. He was the sun on your face where you close your eyes and you can still tell that it's shining. He was the green of the grass down to the very pigment. He was the bird stepping off the branch into flight. He was the feeling of cold, hard ground that once it broke up in your hands, you could never forget how it felt. He was color and freedom and fire and dirt. And for me, I felt like he said to me that one day he was going to put words to it, and then I'd see the muddy, the hard, the broken, the beautiful. One day my story would not be wasted. And so that was me at like 4 or 5 years old. And then you fast forward in my life to around 15, growing up in a single wide trailer in rural West Virginia. In the beginning, that's just sort of all you know, but then you begin to make friends and maybe their life is a little different. And I made friends with my best friend through junior high and high school. I call them in Dirt, I call them the Baptists because they had a nice house and a nice car, and she got a car when we turned 16, and she got the good genes for school, which felt like the good genes equal the good life. And I'm very honest in Dirt where I say, like, I got baptized when I was 15. I started going to church with them around that age and got baptized when I was 15, and I was sort of hoping to emerge from that water as more Baptist than Bess, which was my maiden name. It was this idea that that became a stage in my life where I felt like God had his favorites, and my family clearly was not it. And so if I could become a Baptist, maybe I could have like the blessings that they had. And I think that there's this really interesting journey in our lives where we can know God in the purest form, like I described before. And then he becomes this thing of like what the world tells us he has to be. And there's this big journey of just finding our way back to that original version. And that's been my story, at least, of just coming back to that, God as, there is no separation, right? As close as he could be to leave fog marks on the glass. And as long as we're here on earth, it does feel like it's not as close as we want it to be, but it has really been me really just unraveling all the things that I thought I had to be a Christian, or, all the things I had to say to be a Christian, and more just like, what does it look like to walk every day with this best friend of a God who's also Lord of my life, and it not to be just because I'm hoping I get everything I ever wanted out of it, but it's truly because I love him for being him. So I'd say that's where I got now, but I'm 45 as we're recording this, so it's been a bit of a journey.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
sure it has. In fact, I resonate in many ways with your childhood, although I was raised in a religious home
Mm,
and my dad went bankrupt when
okay.
I was in high school. So then we moved, I'm the oldest of seven children, and we
Wow.
moved into, seven adults now, but we moved into this 1,400 square foot house and with
Wow.
nine people.
Wow.
And anyway, so I resonate a little bit with that and the tumble. There was a
Yeah.
tumble from him being kind of wealthy by some respects, but then we went through bankruptcy and
Mm.
yeah, so
How
and
did that, like for you, did that change how you saw God? Did it draw you closer? Did it feel like, oh, what did we do wrong? Are we being punished?
I didn't feel like that. I felt I had difficulty trusting. So that was a huge issue. Trusting men, trusting my father, because then
Mm,
he left for a while, for a whole year.
wow.
And so then we're kind of on our own in this different situation. And my youngest sister was 6 weeks old.
Wow.
So, and then I stepped up as helping my mom, helping take care, although I had been doing that all along anyway. Yeah, so that I kind of had that role in the family.
Yeah.
And I didn't come to know Jesus until later. And so, as a freshman in college, so
Okay.
it was then after I left home and I had time to think and evaluate, and I met people that I thought were sincere
Mm,
Christians. And then that was part of it, is Jesus trustworthy? And I thought, okay, I think he's the trustworthy one.
hmm.
And so taking that step of faith as a freshman in college then, totally changed my life and direction in life too. So,
Yeah, I love that. Specifically what you're saying about just sort of the sincerity, the sincere, Christian. I think we could have whole episodes on just
yes.
like the people who have actually pushed us further from faith,
Hmm.
ironically, in showing up in what they thought was like a good representation of that faith, and just the hurt that people can do to one another, and how, we can push each other away from God rather than pull them closer. So I know what you
Hmm.
mean. And I think like we each have a call in our lives to do that in different ways. I personally have always felt more called to speak to the person who's felt a little bit on the outside of faith, like they were looking in, like they weren't enough of something to belong in these Christian girl circles or what have you.
Hmm.
I've always felt that way a bit, that I didn't, look the part or play the part, or that my IQ was disqualifying, And so I think we all have like sacred ground that we were put here to help serve on and reclaim or what have you. And it's really interesting. Like that, I think that heart shines through and that sincerity shines through, and, just really paying attention to like how we're showing up as a representation of God and how much that matters.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, it matters so much. Yeah. Thank you. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Something you said about women experiencing their value, I'd love to go back to that, and also how you experience Jesus on a daily basis. I'd love
Mm,
to hear practically, now as
yeah.
an adult, how you're experiencing Jesus on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when I was writing my first book, Dirt, so this is my third book that is coming out,
Uh-huh.
called Underestimated. Number two was Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots. But when I was writing Dirt, I wrote a whole first draft of that book, Jenny, and it was very much like the first time I'm getting down on the page the whole version of what had happened in my story. My mom leaves when I'm 9. Like the trailer was in really rough shape. We had every kind of animal and bug and snake imaginable. It was, we had mushrooms growing out of the carpet at one point. And, there was some, just some really, really hard things in my story. And I write that whole first draft and I hand it off to my editor. And there's like 24 hours that goes by, and I've kind of lovingly called it my Ebenezer Scrooge moment, because I woke up and I saw a future that I did not like, and I wanted to know if there was still time to change it. And so I told my editor, Kelsey, like, I think I'm going to gut 50,000 words and rewrite it. And she was like, okay, you can do that. But just so you know, we have to hand off in 2 months. And I was like, okay. And at that point, I felt like I had already run a marathon of getting the first draft out and, kind of getting all that poison out of the wound and down on
Mm-hmm.
the page. And I wanted to rewrite it now through the lens of grace. Cheryl Strayed famously said, we write what is true, and then truer, and then truest. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's true is how I remember it. Truer is how other people remember it, and being willing to have those hard conversations to learn what we did not know and
Mm-hmm.
understand other things better. And then for me, truest is what is my story through God's eyes. And anyway, so I'm exhausted. I've already feel like I've climbed a mountain in writing the first draft, the first 50,000 words. And now I have 2 months to write this whole new, brand new version of this book. And I was like, I got nothing. I got nothing. And so every day I would sit down, and not to be so super dramatic or, sanctimonious or what have you, but it really truly did feel like manna. Like every morning there was another 750 words. Every evening there was another 750 words. And, Dirt ended up being 70,000 words total.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the most tangible experiences of God that I've ever had because it felt like we were writing that book together.
Oh.
And by that, I mean he was writing it and I was taking transcription. And I have seen that play out now 3 times with all 3 books. And with this book, with Underestimated in particular, I would just pray a prayer every single morning. I said, God, give me a Mary sized portion, not a you sized portion. My brain can't handle that, but a Mary sized portion of this overlapping shore where your infinite well of wisdom and your infinite well of creativity overlap and they kind of create this alchemy, this explosion, alchemy in like the most metaphorical sense, explosion of new ideas that are told in a way that's never quite been seen before, that maybe hits somebody in a way that they've never been hit before. And I said, let me not grow weary of doing good. Let me run this race well to get this idea all the way across the finish line as the fullest, most complete iteration of what it most wants to be, lacking for nothing. And let me be a good partner with this idea because I'm so honored and like can't believe every day that this idea picked me. Help me to do my part to steward it well and to show up and get it across the finish line. And I wrote this book 12 hours a day for 12 months. And let me tell you, the number of days I was curled up in the fetal position on my face on the floor and felt like I could not do it. I didn't have any more in me. And I would pray that prayer and I would think of the faces of the 4 women in real life that I was writing this book for, the avatars of the most target readers. And every day I got up and there was another little bit of manna, right? Another little section could get written. And so I have been experiencing God most tangibly the last 5 years through doing the work that he created me to do. And I think there's a reason that word's, passion means suffering. There's a certain element of like a birthing and a labor to getting this out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's drawn me the closest I've ever been to God in my life. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. It reminds me of the production of her Bible, as an audio Bible in women's voices and
Yeah.
giving women a voice. But also, it was like manna, and I often describe it as Noah's Ark because
Okay.
God was bringing people to me, and there was a lot of passion and suffering and searching, but then God was also bringing people to me, bringing voices, bringing people to come alongside and help. And we had, just for example, one man who was doing the editing and mastering, but he taught his mother how to edit. And so
Okay.
then she taught other women. So then we ended up with this team of women who were doing the editing at home. And they were all so excited to be part of the project and part
Yeah.
of bringing God's word to life in women's voices and for women to feel their value. And by the way, 30% of our listeners are men.
I
And
love that.
yes,
Shout out to the men. All right.
yes.
I love
But
that.
yeah, but there was that daily manna of people and of money trickling in a little by little so that I could pay, the
Right.
people I need to pay. And also just seeing God's word come to life the way women would like to bring it to life. And to then hear people's responses of feeling like it's a sister reading scripture over them. Or one young woman wrote in, "You're helping me not sin. We need
Hmm.
this."
Wow.
So many amazing responses. And one young woman said, "My friend asked for a Bible. I just found her a Bible, so I gave it to her." And she wasn't a Christian, and now she just became a Christian by listening and
Wow.
watching The Chosen. And so it's fun to see things that I dreamed, like, this, could this happen, Lord? And then
Mm.
for, women to be so encouraged and validated through it.
Yeah. I love
Um,
that. I love that. I always like, I have this hope. I don't know that this is, how it works at all, but I have this hope that when we die and we're going to heaven, we get to like see
yes,
just sort of like a movie montage, like a
yes,
little clip of the ripple effects, because there's so many things like that that happen and we'll have no idea while we're here. We'll have no
yes.
idea the impact that we're making. So I hope we get a little recap.
Oh, I think we will. And
Yeah.
plus, you and I are both putting something out there to encourage women, and we don't know where God is going to take it. And many
Yeah.
times when I've been discouraged, I say, "Lord, this is your word, and you have to take it where you want to
That's
go."
right. Oh, is that right? Whew,
Yes,
yes. Put it in the right
yes,
hands. Open the doors that need opening, and close the ones that need closing for sure.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, one of the things I'd love to ask you is who is your favorite female Bible character that has encouraged you and why?
Okay, okay. You know, I'm going to start by saying who I sort of empathize with.
That's fine.
And I think that's Eve. I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of empathy there for Eve because I can be like that where I'm like, I think I got it, God. Just boop, let me pluck this right here and let me know what you know. And that's why I was really careful to say a Mary-sized portion. Because
Hmm.
there's a version of me that would have been quite happy to be like, give me all the creativity and all the wisdom. And I'm very guilty in my life over and over of wanting to play the part of God rather than being in relationship with God. And I have talked before on my show, my podcast, The Mary Marantz Show, about being from Appalachia and being a child of the 80s where we were basically all feral cats running around and being an Enneagram 4 with a very strong wing
Oh.
3. All of those character traits combined to make me a very stoic, very at times hyper vigilant, hyper independent, self sufficient to the point of self sabotage person. And
Hmm.
so I can very easily fall into the trap of I feel like if I don't do it, then I don't deserve it. So that's been a really
Oh.
interesting relationship with grace, which is something I could never earn and that I could never do myself.
Hmm.
And so I really empathize with Eve and this like wanting to know what God knows and wanting to be able to have that kind of control. I think control is really what a lot of it boils down to. And I think, like Eve, there have been times when I've ended up making my life so much harder because of it. But just the reminder that even when we get that wrong and we don't want to be seen by God and we want to hide by God and, from God and cover what He can see in our lives, even though that's impossible, that God is kind enough to still not leave us, even when we take us places that do become harder than they needed to be.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I'd love to share something that I learned about Eve. There's a book called Worthy, and in that book, she talks about Eve, Elise Fitzpatrick, and she talks about how Eve, if we think about what are the last words we hear from Adam,
Mm,
and what are the last words we hear from Eve?
okay.
Do you remember?
I don't. No, tell
Okay,
me.
so Adam's last word were it was her, the one you gave me.
Right.
Eve's last words were, with God's help, I've gotten a man child. And so God made a promise to her, remember, that she was going to, that he was going to send a savior.
Yeah.
And with whatever understanding she had of that, she was excited that she had a son, and maybe this is the one that God has promised. And
Wow.
so I was amazed just to think about that right there in scripture, her story is there, but we sometimes we miss that part of her
Yeah.
faith even after the fall.
Wow. Wow. That's really good. But you know what that also made me think of is what do I want to call it? Like instant gratification hope, where it's like,
Hmm.
oh gosh, I've just caused a fall, but I'm pretty sure that this child I'm gonna have is gonna fix it, right? And it
Hmm.
wouldn't be for generations and generations. And that's also sometimes how it feels in my life of like, oh gosh, this is not going well, but I believe it'll be fixed by tomorrow, and it'll all make sense by tomorrow. And that's something that's been being forged in me for sure, especially the last 5 years when it looks like when my circumstances don't change right away the way I want them to. But that's really interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, that really has caused me to think a lot more about her because she can get the blame, but even in the New Testament, it's Adam that's held responsible. So anyway,
Yeah,
a cheers for Eve.
that's right. That's right.
Were you going to talk about someone else too?
Hmm. I mean, I think you know what I was literally just thinking of. So I guess we'll go with this and my namesake. Have you seen that photo that floats around from time to time where it's a really beautiful painting and it's of Eve and Mary facing one
Oh,
another.
I haven't seen
And
that.
Eve is sort of downtrodden, feeling like, oh, I've ruined everything. And, here's Mary, very pregnant in the painting, and she's sort of tipping Eve's chin up
Uh-huh.
to kind of say,
Oh.
like, it's going to be healed. So we'll give a
Mm-hmm.
shout out to Mary as well. And being asked to do things that would open her up to criticism, and she didn't understand how it was going to work out or how it was going to come to be, and that that it would sort of make a lot of people, the chin wagging, the talking would happen, but stepping out and saying, I'll do it anyway. I'll go where you asked me to. So yeah, we'll say a full circle moment for Eve and Mary.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to ask, how would you encourage women today if women are feeling downtrodden? And in your new book, what is it that you're hoping to encourage women with?
Yeah, this so underestimated for everybody listening, and you're playing a little catch up here. The subtitle is The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. And when we think about playing small, that is not to be confused with, oh, small work doesn't matter, or work in the home, or work in the community right in front of you doesn't matter. It's just anything that has you hiding, like Eve, like our girl Eve, has you hiding instead of stepping out to do the work that you're being asked to do. And so it's sort of based around this idea that fear is actually a really boring liar. And we can see this going all the way back to the very beginning of the Bible, thousands and thousands of years ago, that fear is showing up as the father of lies and using a lot of different, but sort of the same broken scripts on all of us. Like, did God really say that? Are you equipped? It should be anybody else but you, right? And so each chapter by chapter, I sort of go toe to toe with the different faces that fear loves to put on. Things like procrastination, people pleasing, perfectionism, overthinking, imposter syndrome, even a fear of success. We have 14 chapters in total. And I would say that, like, for me, when I was writing this book, I think it's for anybody who struggles with those kind of fears, anybody who has those same sort of broken scripts on repeat in their head. It's all been done. It's all been done better. It's all been done by somebody the world actually cares about. I can't start until it's perfect. I can't start until I'm perfect. What if I start and the critics come? What if they say, who does she think she is? What if I don't know every step in the staircase? What if I don't have the blueprint? What if my voice doesn't really matter? What if I don't really matter? What if it's already too late? If you are sitting there and you're like, yep, check, 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 check. My goal is this book is for anybody who struggles with fear. It is most bullseye target for the woman who has a hard, muddy story and you believe that story disqualifies you. It believes that you cannot be trusted to steward the things you've been given well. And my hope for this book is that it sets an entire generation of women free, like it peels the icy grip of fear off their shoulders and sends them running towards, with endurance. This is not just a sprint, it's a marathon, running with endurance and maturity and hope and faith towards the work that has been created for them uniquely to do. And I feel like this is the group that if they can stop hiding in plain sight and stop playing small, they are going to be, the work done through them is going to send shockwaves around the world. They're going to get to see their movie montage when they get to heaven, and it's going to blow their minds the way that what they did just continued to ripple effect and change lives, which change lives, which change lives. So it's really about just like, can we just be done with fear being so bored? Like he's really not that much of a formidable enemy. The second you realize he's only got like 14 scripts in his back pocket, it's a little more than that, but he's actually very predictable. And so we can actually use that as his weakness against him to predict when we're doing work that matters, because he wouldn't be bothered with us if it didn't. And I say, like, he's not a very creative guy, but he's a busy guy and he's learned how to, prioritize. So he would not be bothered with you if this work wasn't about to really help a lot of people. Yeah,
Wow, I love that. And I had to wrestle through every single one of those
I
as an
bet.
Enneagram 6 to
Okay.
get to where we are today.
Yep. Six wing what? Do you know?
I'm trying to remember what the 5 is. I remember what the
The
7 is.
researcher.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe it is. Yeah, I must be a 5, any
Yeah.
wing 5, because uh, we more focus on the strength finders. And
Okay. Nice.
anyway, yeah, because there was so much in the journey and so much fear, stepping out or struggling, and yeah, every single one of those.
Yeah.
And then also struggling with past generations. Um,
Mm.
because when I realized in 2016 that there wasn't a modern English version of the audio Bible in women's voices,
Mm.
I was wondering why it hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
yeah, it was just kind of hard to see that. And that was kind of a wrestling time with God too. Like,
Yeah.
why haven't women come to the table? And there was a group who did work on it, and they did a different voice for every chapter.
Wow.
And so I think they had a great time doing
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't meet audiobook standards. And so,
Okay.
because every chapter of the Bible was a different voice, it became irritating instead of,
Mm,
being a great audiobook that you could just listen and enjoy. So,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
and I think like what you were talking about there with like it never really being done before, that in and of itself, like that, there's like the work we were put here to do, right?
Yes.
And then there's like a subgenre of that is, and also it's never been done before.
Hmm.
And, in the one hand, like one of the lies that can keep people stuck the most, which I rattled off, is it's all been done
Hmm.
and we don't need more of this. And
Hmm.
that's a fear in and of itself. But then there's this whole other thing of like, we don't even have a blueprint to follow. We have to, make it up as we go.
Hmm.
And there's not even like somebody we could go ask. And that's a whole other territory of
Yeah.
just like, I don't, who's going to be the guide? What's going to be the blueprint? We're just,
Yeah.
feeling around every corner. And so I think that's really brave and courageous, which are really the same thing. I think that's really just like it's so inspiring to see somebody step out and not only do what they're being asked to do, but it's not been done before. That's really
Hmm.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And just resting in the Lord's provision. And when I would get frustrated that it was happening too slowly, and
Yeah.
just like, Lord, why did you give this to me? Someone else could have done it faster.
Right. Right. Well, that's
Um,
something I talk about in Underestimated in chapter 5, which is Not Enough is a Blank Space. One of the sections is about how we over idealize other people. We ascribe to them perfect records that don't exist. And one of the ways we do that is by saying someone else would know how to do this better. Someone else would
uh-huh,
know how to grow this faster. Someone else wouldn't have made this mistake. They already have all the information that I am lacking.
uh-huh.
And so we do that as a really, that's one of, fear's sort of trickier ways of doing it is like, don't worry, somebody else will do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even sharing the idea with women, like their jaws would drop. It would be like, why don't we have this?
Yeah.
And that was so encouraging to me to keep stepping forward.
That's right.
And now there's several. And so I'm excited about more versions of the Bible being available in women's voices and
Mm.
more ministries working on it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just grateful. And then what we're doing now is offering coaching to women to record their own language,
Mm.
because English then is the model for others. And yeah, so that's exciting, because if women in the US need it, even more so in the globe, do women need to hear
Yeah.
God's word in a sister's voice.
That's right. I love that. What
Thank you.
multiplication,
Yes.
That's, and just like sometimes we do need one person to show. It's like the whole thing with like the 4 minute mile. Like for years, people could not do a 4 minute mile. And then
Uh-huh.
the first person does it. And then the second person does it like a week later or whatever the
Hmm.
time, but a very short time later. Sometimes we just need somebody to be willing to go first.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So those are the questions that I have, Mary, but I'd love to hear any insights that you'd like to share.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think like that's some of the most important part of this work. What I said earlier about fear being this boring liar. I'll tell you this, Jenny. I've launched 3 books, and before each book, before 2 of the books, our car died right before, including this one. Before 2 of the launches, my Facebook account was hacked, and we've not been able to recover it. For all 3, a major appliance died. We've had food poisoning, sick dogs, book supply chain issues that delayed book 2 by a month. Like pretty much anything that can go wrong does, but it's like at this point, 3 books in, I actually just laugh and I just say, like, really? 2 dead cars? 2, hacked Facebook accounts? Like, you're boring, Fear. You're so
Mm-hmm.
boring. Like, you're not creative at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is just this, like, my husband and I just sort of, we have gotten to the place where we can just laugh through it of like, oh, I guess this book's going to help a lot of people. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
help a lot of people. Or Fear
Mm-hmm.
would not be, messing with us this much. And so, for everybody listening, a big part of the work of this book is when I was a photographer I went to law school, and then I was a photographer for 15 years with my husband, Justin, including teaching photographers. And one of the things that we learned in those teaching those courses is that humans are wired to learn by story and by very unexpected visual metaphors. If we think of the greatest teacher who ever walked the planet, it was story. and very visceral, unexpected metaphors. Like, oh, we're going to talk about mustard seeds? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And if the people didn't understand the point, Jesus was never like, okay, let me just like tell you what I'm telling you right now. He would just tell another metaphor, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so throughout this book, the main work of the book, the biggest goal for me was to not only name these different faces that fear will put on, but to give really unexpected visual metaphors so that they can be very easily recalled. Because the faster you can think of it, the faster you can catch fear in the act, name exactly what he's doing, the faster all of his power is just going to swoosh right out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a podcast called This Changes Everything, and the host, Sarah Rice, said it's kind of like in The Wizard of Oz when you pull back the curtain on the great and powerful Oz, and there's just a man,
Uh-huh.
this little guy standing behind there. And I said, yeah, like a snake oil salesman who's selling you on the grift, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's selling you a bill of goods that is not what it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you'll see things like in this chapter 4, Second Guessing is a Missing Handbook. I kind of compare that to Edward Scissorhands and feeling like you're walking around in the world without all the pertinent parts. And when you break the rules because you do not know the rules, we are somehow the ones who die death by 1,000 cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the very next time somebody listening finds themselves second guessing because they feel like they didn't get the handbook and other people know things they don't know, they can just go, Edward Scissorhands. Edward Scissorhands problem. That's what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you name it, fear doesn't leave the room,
Mm-hmm.
but all the power somehow just whooshes away.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, if you are somebody who has been stuck procrastinating and people pleasing and waiting for it to be perfect and hoping that you won't be criticized, and you are looking for a trusted guide who has been through all of it, people joke like, oh, like, which one of the chapters do you struggle with the most? I'm like, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
All 14 have attacked me at one point or another. And I have been through all of them. I know all of them very intimately, and there is a way out the other side. If you are looking for somebody to come along, take you by the hand, 2 parts love, 1 part tough, and say, I've been there, but we can't stay here, then this book is for you. And if you actually, for everybody listening, if they want to check out namethefear.com, we have all the information up there about the book, including the whole first chapter up there for free that they can download and start listening to today. Well, reading today, I should say. That chapter, the free chapter, is a read. But if you go ahead and pre-order the book or order the book, depending on when this airs, then you can actually grab the entire audiobook as a bonus when you order. I don't know when this is going to come out, but if it's around launch day, then you can get the whole audiobook. Yeah, check that out. Namethefear.com.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah,
awesome. I love that. And I
yeah,
can't wait to read your book or
yeah.
listen. I'm going to listen.
Yes, I read it. So if you've enjoyed this
Okay, good.
episode,
Yeah.
then yeah,
Uh-huh.
you'll love the audiobook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mary. I love hearing how you're encouraging women and anyone really to not, not let fear stop them and to step out and trust God. And that is
Yeah.
so important. And he's created us with a purpose, and
Hmm.
we all need to know that and live that and let him refresh us with that.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but I've loved hearing your story, getting to know you a little, and thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for being a part of her story by her Bible. And we'd love for any of our listeners to check out our website and listen to the Bible, and it's all for free. And also, we have lots of great resources, and Mary's gonna do a blog for us, and so we're
That's right.
excited to share that with everyone. So, thank you for joining us.